All right, new this morning, the International Court of Justice, also known as the UN's top court, says Israel must act immediately to ensure its forces prevent genocide in Gaza. Here is some of their ruling.
In the court's view, at least some of the acts and omissions alleged by South Africa to have been committed by Israel in Gaza appear to be capable of falling within the provisions of the convention.
So you heard her say appear to be capable of falling within the provisions of the convention. CNN's Melissa Bell is live at The Hague with more on this. Melissa, can you sort of walk us through the wording here, which is very important, and the reactions? There are now a lot of people reacting to this.
Reacting, I think, really strongly, Sarah, just because this ruling went so much further than I think many of us who've been watching these proceedings over the last couple of weeks thought that they would. These were fairly unanimous decisions, all bar one or two of the judges ruling in favor of these 6 measures that do stop short of calling for an immediate ceasefire. And I think that to the South Africans who had brought this case is a disappointment. They had hoped it would go so far, and yet when you consider the 6 immediate measures that this court has ruled in favor of, and again, Sarah, I think it's important to remember these are preliminary emergency measures that South Africa had been requesting the International Court of Justice to take in order that the war in Gaza cease, so that these events could be investigated and the more substantive allegations be pursued by this court. That will happen, but it could take years for this court to decide on the question of whether or not genocide has been committed inside Gaza. Meanwhile, though, those 6 measures extremely significant, because whilst they stop short of calling for a ceasefire, they do call for the immediate end of the killing or causing of serious bodily or mental harm to the Palestinian people, which this court has recognized are a protected people. And that is extremely significant, does go in the direction of the South Africans, and yet have a listen to what South Africa's foreign minister had to say in response, and an acknowledgement of their disappointment that the court didn't go so far as to call for an immediate ceasefire.
I believe that in exercising the order, there would have to be a ceasefire. Without it, the order doesn't actually work. I would have wanted a ceasefire.
Now, the word ceasefire, of course, never mentioned, and yet the order that has been made here by the court does pile huge pressure on Israel, not only to report back on what's happening and what measures it's taken to prevent the further committing of acts, the killings that I mentioned a moment ago, that significant pressure on Israel. We had been very curious as we heard the pro-Palestinian protesters here shout as we heard those measures pronounced, very much favorable to what they heard, almost surprised that the court had gone so far in their direction. This is what Benjamin Netanyahu had to say a moment ago in a short video message that was released in the wake of the ruling.
Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it.
So a good deal of outrage there coming from Israel in the wake of that ruling, and yet part of the ruling that we heard here today in The Hague is that there is plausibility when it comes to the possibility that genocidal acts are being committed inside Gaza, and that, in terms of the weight of public opinion and the pressure that is likely to be put on Israel, I think, Sarah, for it to change at least the way that it is waging this war is going to be significant.
Yeah, it's significant. It's unusual. It's also, we should mention that we're hearing a lot of the protests behind you, and we're seeing a sizable protest outside of The Hague this morning in the Netherlands there as well. Melissa Bell, thank you for breaking all that down for us. It's a complicated stuff, but it is very clear where these judges are going. Appreciate it. John?
All right, while this is happening, this morning we're learning new details about a phone call between President Biden and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. CNN political and global affairs analyst Barak Ravid is with us now. He's also a politics and foreign policy reporter for Axios. And Barak, this is your reporting. I woke up to it. What did you learn about this phone call?
Well, I think this phone call was very interesting because it showed us how much President Biden and his team and the White House are nervous about this war going on for much longer when you take into consideration that we are in an election year. And Biden told Netanyahu in the phone call last Friday that he is not in it for a year of war in Gaza, meaning a war that started in October 2023 that might reach October 2024 and the US presidential election. And what I heard from several of Biden aides is that they see how this war affects them when it comes to especially young voters in America, and that every day that the Gaza war is still dominating the news is political damage for Biden's presidential campaign. So this is why Biden pressed Netanyahu to scale down Israeli military operations in Gaza as soon as possible.
Pressure, any ultimatums?
Well, not an ultimatum. I think this is not, at least not yet. But I think that, you know, when the president of the United States is telling the Israeli prime minister, I'm not in it for a year of war in Gaza, and when he tells you you need to scale back operations, that is, at least in my opinion, the most forward-leaning Biden was until now in private with Netanyahu when it comes to the need to expedite the end of the war.
Benjamin Netanyahu in the past, I mean, he knows American politics. He's played in U.S. electoral politics before, Barak. Any sense of what he might want here in terms of Joe Biden's political success?
I think it's too soon. Netanyahu has a lot of baggage with Donald Trump. They're not best friends in the last several years. So I'm not even sure that Netanyahu is rooting for this candidate or another. But I think, as he told Biden in the call, listen, we thought that we'll get more done more quickly. And we found out that it's not the case. And therefore, we still have a lot of work to do in Gaza. Biden didn't like to hear that. But, you know, that's the case for now. And what I heard from Netanyahu's people today is that they're not going to stop, at least at the moment.
Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, however, is describing this essentially as a victory.
Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it.
Now, these rulings today are binding but not enforceable. And Prime Minister Netanyahu did say that under the rules, international law, Israel is following international law. He said Israel was already doing everything it can to protect the lives of civilians.